You are so lovely and beautiful. Your family will be proud of whoever you choose.
I wish my entire life will be in your arms, and I will be much happier.
He said it on a warm Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting on a weathered wooden bench on the cabin porch, watching her wash clothes. She worked with an easy strength that made everything look simple. He hadn't planned to say it. He hadn't rehearsed it at all. The words just came out the way true things sometimes do, before his better judgment could stop them. You know, Amelia, your family will be proud of whoever you choose. He expected a polite smile, or maybe a quick laugh, the kind of safe answer that lets everyone move on without anyone having to be brave. Instead, her hands froze against the wet clothes in the tub. The color came into her face slowly, like a lamp being turned up in a dark room. She didn't look at him right away. But when she finally raised her head, her eyes were red-rimmed and glistening with tears. Her expression was something he had never seen before. She looked open, afraid, and completely decided all at once. And she said very softly, "I only care if it's you." William was 28 years old. He was a rugged, hard-working frontier laborer who spent his days doing heavy ranch work. His hair was always messy and unkempt from the wind, and he wore a simple linen shirt with dark work trousers held up by suspenders. He wasn't a complicated man. He worked hard, kept his word, and went to bed tired every single night. But what he didn't have, and what he had quietly stopped expecting, was someone to love. His neighbors to the east were the Harmon family, and their daughter was Amelia. Amelia was 24. She woke up before sunrise every day to tend the garden, cook the meals, and help with the heavy washing. She wore a simple slate blue prairie dress with her blonde hair tied back in a loose bun. She did all of her hard work without ever complaining. William had known her for years. He had eaten dinner at her family's table and spoken to her dozens of times. He always thought she was a fine, capable girl. But until that exact summer, he had never truly understood what he was looking at. The two properties were connected by a dusty dirt yard. A lot of work needed to be done around the ranch, and on that warm Tuesday, William was resting on the porch bench while Amelia came down to wash. She didn't notice him at first. She set her wash tub down and began working with a wooden washboard, humming a low song to herself. William sat there in his rumpled beige shirt, his arms resting on his knees. He wasn't trying to stare, but his eyes naturally went to her. The whole landscape was quiet, except for the sound of her scrubbing the clothes. Every now and then, she would pause and look out at the distant mountains with a private expression he couldn't quite read. William was not a man who expected much from the world. Every morning, long before the sun peeked over the cold Colorado mountains, he was already awake. He would pull on his heavy, dark work trousers, snap his suspenders into place, and lace up his worn leather boots. His beige linen shirt was always a little rumpled, and his brown hair stayed messy no matter how many times the wind blew through it. By the time the first light of day hit the dusty ranch yard, William was already hard at work. His daily routine was exhausting. There were heavy wooden posts to haul, fences to patch, and cattle to drive across the rocky terrain. He chopped wood until his arms turned sore and his hands were covered in rough calluses. He did all of this without a single word of complaint. He took a quiet pride in keeping his word, paying his debts, and doing what needed to be done. When the sun finally dipped below the hills, he would walk back to his empty cabin, eat a simple supper, and go to bed completely tired. It was a lonely life, but it was the only life he knew. Over the years, William had built deep emotional walls around his heart. When he was younger, he had lost people he cared about, and that pain had taught him a harsh lesson. He learned that wanting things directly only led to losing them directly. To protect himself from ever hurting like that again, he simply stopped hoping for a different future. He convinced himself that a rugged, unpolished laborer like him was meant to be alone. If you do not expect joy, he reasoned, you will never be disappointed when it does not show up. Because of this, William became an expert at looking at the landscape around him without truly seeing it. He saw the grass, the dirt, and the cattle, but he missed the deeper beauty of his own life. He had grown so used to his solitary world that he barely noticed how quiet his cabin felt in the evenings. He had completely shut the door on the idea of a family or a home filled with warmth. He treated his loneliness like an old heavy coat that he simply had to wear every day. He did not realize that his self-protective distance was actually keeping him in a cage. He was a steady man, but he was also a frozen one, hiding behind his daily chores so he would never have to take a risk or be brave again. Just a short distance across the dusty dirt yard lived the Harmon family, and at the heart of their home was Amelia. She was 24 years old, but she possessed a quiet strength that made the difficult frontier life look peaceful. Every single morning, long before the sun warmed the valley, Amelia was already moving. While the stars were still bright in the dark sky, she would carefully tie her blonde hair back into a loose, practical bun and step out into the chilly air. Her days were filled with endless, heavy chores. She tended to the large family garden, bending over the rows of vegetables until her back was tired. She cooked 3 large meals a day over a hot iron stove and spent hours scrubbing heavy linens. In her simple slate blue prairie dress, with her sleeves rolled up for hard physical labor, she worked with an easy efficiency. Yet, no one ever heard Amelia complain. She did not look at her duties as a burden. Instead, she moved through her daily work as naturally as a person breathes, bringing a sense of calm and order to everything she touched. What made Amelia truly special, however, were the quiet acts of kindness she performed when she thought no one was watching. She had a giving heart that never asked for attention or praise. When the winter winds grew too harsh and old Mr. Briggs down the road could barely move because of his bad back, Amelia would quietly pack a jar of hot, fresh soup into a basket. She would walk through the biting cold to deliver it to his porch, leaving it there without a sound so he wouldn't feel embarrassed by his need for help. She lived her life entirely without fanfare. If she mended a neighbor's torn coat or baked an extra loaf of bread for a struggling family, she never mentioned it afterward. She did not seek to be noticed or admired by the people in the valley. She simply saw a need and quietly filled it. To the rest of the community, she was a steady, comforting presence, a bright light in a rugged land. William had seen her doing these things for years from his side of the property. He had always known she was a good neighbor and a capable girl, but his own guarded heart had kept him from truly seeing the grace and beauty that lived just a few hundred yards away. The heat of the summer began to soften by the end of July, bringing the night of the town social. The local barn was filled with the bright sounds of fiddles, the stomping of boots, and the warm glow of hanging lanterns. Neighbors from all over the valley had gathered to escape their hard daily routines for just one evening. William stood near the edge of the wooden floor, keeping his back to the wall as he usually did. He held a cup of cold cider, content to simply watch the crowd and stay in his safe, quiet corner. But as the night went on, his eyes kept drifting to the center of the room. Amelia was there, navigating the crowded barn with an easy confidence. She wasn't wearing her usual work apron, but a clean, simple dress that seemed to catch the golden lantern light perfectly. Whenever someone spoke to her, she listened with genuine warmth, her laughter rising easily over the music. William watched other young men from the valley approach her, asking her to dance or offering her refreshments. Every time a new suitor stepped up to her, William felt a strange, unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He didn't understand the feeling, but he couldn't look away. He thought he was being completely hidden, blending seamlessly into the shadows of the barn. But he wasn't as invisible as he believed. An old family friend, a sharp-eyed widow named Mrs. Morrison, walked over and stood right next to him. She didn't look at William at first. She just watched the dance floor too. After a long, heavy silence, she leaned in slightly and spoke in a blunt, quiet voice. "If you stare at that girl any harder, William, you're going to burn a hole right through her dress." William froze, his face instantly turning hot. He tried to look away, stammering a polite excuse about just watching the crowd, but the old woman simply shook her head. "You're a good, steady man, William," Mrs. Morrison said, her tone softening just a bit. "But you're entirely blind to your own heart. She's been standing right in front of you for years, and you've spent the whole night watching other men try to win her over. A girl like Amelia won't wait around forever while you hide in the dark." She patted his arm and walked away, leaving him entirely disarmed. For the rest of the evening, the music seemed to fade into the background. Mrs. Morrison's words rang loudly in his ears, forcing him to finally confront the reality he had ignored for so long. He wasn't just looking at a neighbor anymore. He was staring at the one person who could truly shatter his lonely world, and for the first time in his life, he was terrified of what might happen if he stayed silent. A few days after the town social, a golden August sun warmed the entire valley. William was finishing up his morning chores when he saw Amelia preparing to carry a heavy basket of supplies across the property line. Remembering the widow's blunt words, his heart beat a little faster, but he forced himself to walk over. He quietly volunteered to accompany her, offering to carry the heavy load so she wouldn't have to walk the long valley trail alone. Amelia looked up, surprised by his sudden offer, but she accepted with a warm, genuine smile that instantly made him glad he had stepped out of his comfort zone. As they walked side by side down the dusty dirt path, the initial awkwardness began to melt away. The morning sun was bright and gentle, casting a peaceful glow over the open fields. Away from the noise of the town and the distractions of their busy families, they began to talk. At first, they spoke of simple things like the weather and the upcoming harvest. But as the miles stretched on, their conversation became deeper and entirely unhurried. William was amazed by what he discovered. He had always known Amelia was hardworking, but as they walked, she revealed a sharp mind and a quiet, clever wit. She spoke about her dreams for the valley, her thoughts on the changing seasons, and how she found beauty in the simple rhythms of frontier life. For the first time, William opened up too, sharing thoughts he usually kept locked away behind his emotional walls. He found himself talking about his past, his respect for the land, and the quiet hopes he had buried long ago. They understood each other perfectly. It was as if they spoke a private language that no one else in the valley knew. They didn't have to pretend or hide their true thoughts. They could just be themselves. William realized that Amelia wasn't just a capable neighbor. She was an intellectual and emotional match who truly understood his silent, steady nature. Eventually, the easy conversations slowed, and a comfortable stillness settled over them. It wasn't an awkward or lonely silence like the one William was used to in his empty cabin. Instead, it was a lingering, warm silence filled with a newfound understanding. As they reached the edge of the property, the quiet space between them felt heavy with unspoken feelings. William looked at Amelia, whose blonde hair was catching the golden morning light, and he knew his world had shifted permanently. He was no longer just a solitary laborer passing the time. He was a man walking beside his true destiny, and the beautiful silence between them proved that she felt it too. The warm Tuesday afternoon sun hung high over the valley, casting long shadows across the cabin porch. William sat on the weathered wooden bench, his heart pounding against his ribs. He looked at Amelia, who stood perfectly still over the galvanized metal wash tub. Her intense confession still echoed in the quiet air between them. I only care if it's you. For a long moment, the entire world seemed to stop. William felt a wave of shock crash over him, completely disarming his usual cautious nature. He looked at her tear-filled red-rimmed eyes and the single glistening tear track on her cheek. For years, his deep emotional walls had kept him safe and lonely in the dark. But looking at her vulnerability, he knew he couldn't hide anymore. He had to be brave. William took a deep breath, matching her raw honesty. He stood up from the bench, stepping closer to the wash tub. "Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion but completely steady. "I have spent a long time being afraid of wanting things. I thought a rugged laborer like me was meant to be alone, so I closed my eyes to what was right in front of me. But the truth is, I don't want anyone else either. It has always been you." Amelia let out a soft, breathless sigh, a look of profound relief washing over her face. The heavy silence that usually filled William's life was replaced by a warm, shared understanding. He knew that breaking the status quo meant there was no turning back, and he didn't want to. "I don't want to hide in the shadows anymore," William continued, looking directly into her eyes. "If you will have me, I want to do this the right way. I want to walk up to your porch tonight and ask your father for his permission to court you properly." Amelia smiled through her tears, nodding her head as she gripped the edges of the wash tub. In that single beautiful moment, the old rules of the frontier didn't matter. They had both stepped across the line into the light, leaving William's lonely world behind forever. True to his word, William walked across the dusty yard that very evening as the stars began to blanket the Colorado sky. His heart hammered heavily against his ribs as he stepped onto the Harmon family's porch. He had washed the dirt from his hands and smoothed down his messy hair, but he still felt entirely unpolished. When Amelia's father, Daniel, stepped outside and pointed toward a pair of wooden chairs, William sat down and braced himself. He expected a strict interrogation. He expected the older man to question his modest income, his lonely lifestyle, or whether a humble laborer was truly good enough for a daughter as remarkable as Amelia. Instead, a quiet stillness settled over the porch, broken only by the rhythmic creaking of Daniel's rocking chair. Daniel did not look angry. He simply looked at William with a calm, knowing expression. He reached into his pocket, took out his pipe, and let out a long, slow sigh that seemed to carry the entire weight of the frontier. "You look like a man waiting for a lashing, William," Daniel said, his voice surprisingly gentle in the evening air. William swallowed hard and cleared his throat. "I came to ask for your permission to court Amelia properly, sir. I know I don't have much, but I promise to work hard and—" Daniel held up a rough, calloused hand, cutting him off with a soft chuckle. "William, you are a good, steady neighbor, but you are slower than a frozen creek when it comes to your own heart. Did you truly think we didn't notice the way you've looked at her all these years?" William blinked in total shock, his voice catching in his throat. "We haven't been keeping you away, son," Daniel continued, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. "We have been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you to finally look up from your chores and see the blessing that was standing right in front of you. Her mother and I have known for a long time that you were the only man in this valley who could truly match her strength." The immense weight of acceptance washed over William, so sudden and powerful it made his eyes sting. The harsh, protective walls he had built to guard against rejection felt completely useless against Daniel's warmth. "But hear me clearly, William," Daniel added, his face turning serious but kind. "Amelia is a rare girl, and she has already been brave enough to open the door for you. I am giving you my blessing, but I am also challenging you. Don't hide in your shadows anymore. Love her clearly, love her out loud, and give her the home she deserves." William nodded his head, a profound sense of gratitude filling his chest. As he looked back toward his own dark, empty cabin, he realized he didn't have to wear his loneliness like a heavy coat anymore. He had been accepted, and for the first time in his life, he felt entirely ready to step into the light. By the middle of October, a crisp autumn chill had settled deep into the valley. The golden cottonwood leaves were falling, and the night air felt sharp and cold against William's face. He had washed up after a long day of cutting firewood, combed his messy hair, and put on his cleanest linen shirt. Tonight, he was walking across the open property line to the Harmon house for dinner. It was a walk he had taken many times lately, but as he reached the middle of the dark, wide field between their homes, his boots suddenly ground to a halt. A heavy, suffocating panic rushed into his chest. Looking out across the dark landscape, the yellow glow from the Harmon family's windows seemed miles away. Standing there in the freezing stillness, William was hit by the terrifying realization of how much he had changed. His quiet, safe, lonely life was completely gone. He had let his guard down, and now he loved Amelia with every single piece of his heart. But with that deep love came an overwhelming fear that stopped him in his tracks. His old traumas and past losses rose up in the dark like shadows. His mind began to whisper the cruel lessons he had learned long ago. If you let yourself want something this much, the world will only take it away from you. Loving someone means giving them the power to break you. He realized that if anything ever happened to Amelia, the pain would completely destroy him. The walls he had spent years building to protect himself felt totally shattered, leaving him exposed and terrified in the open field. He stood frozen in the cold night, caught in a fierce battle with his own mind. Part of him wanted to turn around and run back to the safety of his dark, empty cabin. In his cabin, he wouldn't feel this terrifying weight. In his cabin, he could wear his loneliness like an old coat and never have to worry about the pain of losing anyone again. He looked back at his own dark porch, then turned his eyes once more toward the warm, bright windows of the Harmon house. He pictured Amelia standing inside, perhaps looking out the glass, waiting for him with that same brave, open smile she had worn by the wash tub. She had been courageous enough to speak her heart when she was afraid, and her father had challenged him to love her out loud. William took a slow, deep breath, the cold air clearing his mind. He knew that running away would be the worst mistake of his life. He could not spend the rest of his days hiding in the dark just to avoid being hurt. Loving Amelia was a risk, but it was a beautiful risk that was worth everything. Pushing past the heavy fear in his chest, William took a certain step forward. Then he took another, leaving his old armor behind in the shadows as he walked out of the dark field and into the warm, welcoming light of her doorway. November arrived, bringing a quiet stillness to the valley. The crisp autumn air was peaceful, and the setting sun painted the Colorado sky in deep shades of gold and amber. William and Amelia walked together, their boots crunching softly on the dry leaves as they approached the edge of the property line. This was the exact place where their two worlds met, a spot marked by old wooden fence posts and memories of shared hard work. William stopped walking and turned to face Amelia. His heart was beating fast, but he no longer felt the terrifying panic that had frozen him in the dark field a month ago. He looked at her blonde hair catching the last rays of the golden sunset, and he knew he didn't need a grand, dramatic display to show her his heart. He didn't need fancy words or a loud announcement in front of the whole town. Their love had grown in the quiet spaces of everyday life, and that was exactly how he wanted to keep it. With a steady hand, William reached into the pocket of his dark trousers and pulled out a simple silver ring. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was bright, honest, and strong, just like the life they were building together. He held it out between them, his eyes locked onto hers with pure devotion. "Amelia," William said, his voice quiet but completely certain in the evening air. "I don't have a grand castle to offer you, and my hands will always be rough from working the land. But I promise to stand by you through every harsh winter and every long harvest. I promise to love you clearly, out loud, for the rest of my days. Will you marry me?" A beautiful smile broke across Amelia's face, and tears of joy glistened in her eyes. She didn't hesitate for a single second. She stepped forward, closing the small distance between them, and slipped her hand warmly into his rough palm. "Yes, William," she whispered, her voice filled with a deep comfort. "It has always been you." William gently slipped the simple silver band onto her finger. As they stood together under the fading autumn light, a quiet, certain understanding sealed their commitment. They didn't need to shout their joy to the valley. The gentle wind rustling through the trees and the warm glow of the golden sunset were witness enough. The heavy walls of William's past were completely gone, replaced by a beautiful promise for the future, right at the edge of the land they both loved. When the gentle warmth of April finally melted the winter snow, the valley came alive with green grass and wild frontier flowers. It was the perfect backdrop for their spring wedding. The celebration was simple and sweet, filled with the happy laughter of their families and neighbors. Standing beside Amelia, William looked at her beautiful smile and felt a deep, overwhelming gratitude. He was no longer the lonely laborer hiding in the shadows. He was a man stepping into a bright, shared future. Shortly after they married, William secretly began working on a special project for their ranch house. While Amelia was away helping her mother, he took his tools and carefully cut a large open square into the thick logs of the cabin's eastern wall. He worked hard for hours, measuring the frame, smoothing the wood, and installing a beautiful glass pane. He wanted it to be a surprise. He secretly installed this new window facing east so that Amelia would always have the golden morning light warming her face the very moment she woke up each day. When Amelia first saw the window, tears of pure joy glistened in her eyes, and she hugged him tightly. As the years steadily passed, that sunlit window became the heart of their home. Their future family life was filled with a deep, peaceful rhythm. Before long, the quiet cabin was no longer empty. It was filled with the sweet sounds of two happy children playing on the wooden floor. Every morning, the bright eastern light would stream through the glass, casting a golden glow over Amelia and the kids as they started their day. William would stand by the doorway, holding his cup of coffee, watching his family with a full heart. Looking at the warmth and life filling his home, William came to a profound realization. He reflected on all the years he had spent wearing his loneliness like a heavy coat, thinking he was meant to be isolated and alone. He realized that the greatest things in life are never hidden away in secret places. They don't require us to search the entire world to find them. Instead, the truest blessings are usually right beside us all along, completely out in the open, just waiting for us to be brave enough to look up and see them. Moral lesson. Based on the story of William and Amelia, here are the core moral lessons from their journey. The truest blessings are often right beside us. We don't need to search the entire world to find happiness or fulfillment. Often, the greatest joys, opportunities, and people are already present in our everyday lives, simply waiting for us to be brave enough to look up and recognize them. Vulnerability requires true courage. Real bravery isn't about hiding your feelings or pretending to be unbreakable. As Amelia showed when she confessed her heart at the wash tub, being honest about what you want, even when it is terrifying, is the only way to build a deep, meaningful connection with someone else. Fear of loss can lock you in an empty cage. Building emotional walls to guard against past pain might keep you safe from being hurt, but it also locks out love, warmth, and growth. Guarding yourself too heavily turns your life into a solitary survival routine instead of a meaningful journey. Love is spoken through quiet actions. True love doesn't require loud, dramatic announcements or grand gestures. It is engineered in the quiet rhythms of daily life, like Amelia carrying soup to a sick neighbor in the cold, or William secretly cutting a window into a log cabin just so his wife can catch the morning light. You must move past hesitation to claim your destiny. True happiness requires a conscious choice to step out of the shadows and walk through the doors that open for you. If William had let his panic control him in the dark field, he would have committed the greatest mistake of his life by retreating into permanent loneliness.